schoolers and high schoolers, thank you so much for joining me for the Ignite lesson for tonight. It's going to be all about what to do when you have no idea what to do. Now be honest, do you ever feel like you are living two different worlds? There's your life in the actual world, around school, church, or friends, and then there's your life at home that most people don't know much about. And although we probably won't admit it, isn't it true that we're all weirder at home? Here's what I mean. I can't believe I'm actually admitting to this, but when I'm at home, I am almost always singing to myself. Whether I'm cleaning things up, fixing a light bulb, or working out, I'm probably going to be humming some brand new song I made up in my head about whatever I'm doing. I'm serious. I literally sing about whatever I'm doing. I'm kind of embarrassed about it, but here's the thing. Have any of you ever heard me randomly singing to myself? Probably not. It's just the thing that I do at home by myself. Now, hold on before you judge me too much, because here's what I know for sure. You do it too. You might not sing, but we all act in ways at home that we would never act with our friends or at church or in public. Not only are we way weirder at home, but most of us are a little more difficult at home, especially with all this time at home you've been getting. Think about it. You would never leave your nasty gym socks on the stairs at a friend's house, but you don't think twice about it at your own house. You would never talk to your teacher the way you might talk to your stepmom. You would never be as mean to a teammate as you are to your brother. And like me, you probably don't go off nearly as quickly on anybody outside your family as you do on the people inside your family. But how is this possible? More importantly, why is this? Why do we act in two completely different ways depending on where we are? There may be a lot of reasons for this, but when I think back to when I was in middle school or when I was in high school, one of the main reasons for me is I thought of home like my world, and everybody else in my family was just living in it. You know what I mean? Maybe we don't say it out loud, and that might not be what we intend, but we do things like we walk in the door and we want to know if dinner is something we like, even though our mom just cooked for us. We complain about babysitting our siblings because we have other plans, which seem more important than anything else the rest of the family has going on. It is our world and we want it to be our way, but that's not nearly as true anywhere else. Most of us wouldn't go to a friend's house for dinner and say, "Ugh, I hate lasagna. Why did you make that? It's gross." You wouldn't do that. We would never tell our coach we aren't coming to the game because we had other plans already. Or at least you shouldn't, and you probably don't. For some of us, home feels like the only place it's safe to be the realest version of ourselves. And that's great. The people we live with will, hopefully, still love us even when we're being ridiculous. But at the same time, we all tend to not just be the realest at home, but also the worst versions of ourselves at home. And this does matter. It matters to God, and it matters in this season more than ever before. No matter what's happening, I ask myself this question. You ready for it? How does this affect me? Think about it. Everything we say or do at home is in response to how that question is answered. Do you believe me? How does this affect you? Maybe you would say this. My family loves hamburgers, but I'm a vegetarian. So what do? They grill burgers on Saturday. And I'm over here trying not to puke, eating the black bean version of this stuff. So I make a point to let everyone know how bad it is over and over and over again. Or I don't get to FaceTime with my friends because I have to babysit my siblings. How does that affect me? Well, that isn't fair. So I'm going to give my parents attitude all night long. Or I studied so hard for my test while my sister scrolled TikTok all night, and she got a better grade than me. How does that affect me? Well, she doesn't deserve that A, so obviously, now I'm annoyed with her. and I'm going to treat her that way to make sure that she knows. See, what I don't think a lot of us realize as we think about our lives at home is how much our response to the question, how does this affect me, changes the vibe in our house. As we respond to how things are affecting us, the people in our house are responding to how we are affecting them. Then we respond to that, and most of us don't realize we're playing a key role in the general feeling of our house. Is this always true? No, it's not. But for some of us, we know we're at least a part of the cycle of tension and attitude where we live. And that's a problem. The question is, what do you do about it? What do you do when there are things that are tough at home, when the mood is off and tense, when you know you're a part of the reasons things are tense, but you have no idea what to actually do about it, to even want to do something about it? Listen, you don't need me to tell you that family is hard. But the good news in all of this is that the difficulty you face with your family isn't unique to you. And it's been going on for thousands of years, literally. In fact, one of the things I love most about the real events in the Bible is how it gives us a real look at real people who lived real lives and had a lot of real problems. And over the next couple of weeks, we are going to spend some time looking at the life of Joseph. Now, Joseph was one of the most famous people in the first half of the history found in the Bible. He's just a guy who, like the rest of us, found himself in all kinds of situations where he didn't know what to do. That was basically what happened his entire life. Joseph's story is really wild. It's like the most dramatic Netflix show you have ever seen. There are murder plots, he's sold into slavery, he's unfairly put into jail, the story twists and turns everywhere, and the drama doesn't stop. We will get to that in the next few weeks, but his story really starts with the drama in his own family. Let me give you some background. Joseph was one of 12 sons who all had Jacob as their dad. Now, Jacob's story was really complicated. He fell in love with a woman named Rachel, but was tricked into marrying Rachel's sister, Leah, instead. But Jacob loved Rachel and thought she was the beautiful one. So he worked for her father for 7 years so he could marry her too. So if you're keeping count, that leaves Jacob with 2 wives. And they were sisters. It sounds like a show on TLC, doesn't it? There were 2 other women he never married, but who he also had children with. And plot twist, Rachel, the wife that Jacob loved the most, couldn't have children. While all these other women gave him kids, Rachel couldn't until all of a sudden she was pregnant with Joseph. He was like the miracle baby, and Jacob, the dad, was crazy about him. That means in this family, there was 1 father and 4 mothers and 12 sons. And because of that, there was tension, because it was no secret who the favorites were. This is where we pick up on the life of Joseph. It starts in Genesis chapter 37. So if you want to get open your Bible and turn to Genesis chapter 37, that would be awesome. In that chapter, we read about how Jacob made a special robe for Joseph, a physical reminder of how much more his dad loved him than the other brothers. And the brothers despised him for it. Probably like you would, probably like I would. At that time, robes were like the newest Jordans. They were a really big deal. That wasn't the only issue, though. Joseph had a series of dreams. So this is from Genesis chapter 37, verses 6 through 7. It says, "He said to them, 'Hear this dream that I have dreamed. Behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright. And behold, your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf.'" Okay, so now you might not have any idea what that means because it's not your typical dream. And the brothers knew it. This dream wasn't really about grain. It was about power. And Joseph was sending a message by sharing the dream. He was saying, "Hey guys, listen to this. I actually think I know that I'm going to be more powerful than you one day. And when that day comes, you will all worship me." For a younger brother to say this to older brothers was not going to fly. The passage goes on. It says, his brother said to him, "Are you indeed to reign over us? Or are you indeed to rule over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Okay. The vibe was harsh. Joseph's brothers were over his robes and his dreams and his favoritism. And then Joseph had another dream, just in the same chapter, involving the sun, moon, and stars bowing down to him. It was sending the same message, but this time it included his parents bowing down as well. He tells his dad, Jacob, and his brothers, who now hate him even more. Not the best move. Can you imagine the tension in this family? One dad, 4 moms, 12 boys, and now the favorite son who goes around telling people he's having visions of everyone bowing down to him. Why would he do that? But Joseph wasn't acting in a way that considered any of that. Joseph was behaving like all of us do in our families sometimes, hyper aware of how we are being treated and not really aware of how it affects anybody else. Guilty as charged? And Joseph's family was acting the same way. All Joseph's brothers could see was how the whole situation affected them personally. They noticed the unfairness and injustice in the way they were treated. I mean, Joseph receiving the robe he did as a gift was like being given a brand new car when he turned 16, while all the other brothers had to share mom's ancient minivan. It wasn't right, it wasn't fair, and they saw it. The truth is, even though these few verses are about more than some strange dreams and a coat, it is about how the tension in the family was never dealt with. The tension was left to grow. And we are still reading this story today for a reason. Why? To show us that family has always been complicated since the very beginning of the Bible. To teach us to pay attention to how our actions and even our situations affect the people we live with. It can also remind us that tension left unresolved will never, ever just go away. It will always escalate to something bigger. Like next week, we'll see how Joseph's escalated to a biblical dumpster fire kind of situation. But that's for next week. Until then, what could everyone in the family have done differently in this situation? Well, let's think about it. What could Joseph have done? Joseph could have started to see himself as part of the problem, as one person in a large and complicated family, not in the center of that family. The dad, Jacob, could have recognized how his favoritism was impacting the entire family. The brothers could have chilled out a little bit on the grudges and gossip about Joseph. Everybody could have ignored Joseph's dreams and not allowed their insecurity to control them. The point is this: Joseph's family drama isn't all that different than your own. You probably don't have 4 moms or 12 brothers, but whether you're the favorite one, the angry one, the firstborn, the lastborn, the quiet one, the one with the gold medal in the door slamming department, the truth is the same here. There is a role that you play in your family. Pay attention to how your words and your actions contribute to the tone and temperature of the house in which you live. Are you improving it? Are you making it more tense? Then decide what you want your role to be here on out. In other words, I'm asking you to pay attention to how you affect your family, because God gave you that family to live in. And then choose how you'll treat your family. If you aren't sure where to begin, take a look at this passage in the letter Paul wrote to the church. It's in Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 through 8. If you want to, you can turn there now. This is what it says. Again, this is verses 3 through 8. It says, "Do nothing from rivalry or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. Have this mind amongst yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but made himself nothing, taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men. He has a point there. Read over those verses and think about how you can take that verse and live like that within your family. Maybe you start the day, every single day, reading those verses and thinking about how you're going to have humility, how you're going to look out for others' interests, how you're going to have a mind like Jesus Christ. Paul is saying, look, Jesus sets the example here. He gave up the privileges that came with being God. He deserved to be treated like God, but didn't require that of people. He chose to serve and have compassion on humans, even when they didn't deserve it at all. And Paul is reminding the Philippians and us to be that kind of person with those around us, those in our families, those that God has given us. So the $1 million question is this: how do we do that when we don't know what to do at our house? Well, we start by paying attention to how we see ourselves. Do you think or act like you're better than the people in your house or your family? Maybe. Is that accurate? Probably not. So what would it look like to treat our siblings, our step-siblings, our cousins, or the adults in our house as equal, or maybe even more important than ourselves, as those with authority? And finally, and maybe hardest of all, we need to invite someone else to speak into how we treat our family. I know, this is where it gets really hard. Honestly, it's nearly impossible to see clearly the role we play in our family, but others around us can definitely see it. And by asking them, they can help us see ourselves and our families with 20/20 vision. In fact, asking someone older and wiser is one of the best things to do when you don't know what to do with any circumstance, let alone family dynamics. That's why we have small groups, by the way. We all need people around us and people older than us, like a leader, who can know what's really going on in our families and help us to figure out what to do when we don't know what to do. They help us gain wisdom. Imagine for a second if everybody in your family did this. Think about it. What if everyone paid attention to how they affect everyone else? What would it do for your relationship with the people that live in your house? What would it do for the general level of tension or peace at your house? What if that started with you? It could. You could be like Christ to your family. You could read those verses. Again, it's Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 through 8, every morning, and decide to live like that in your house with your family so that you can love them the way that God wants you to love them. Thank you so much for learning about Joseph with me, and I can't wait to see you back next week. Bye.